Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Evan Lester. He's our last presenter of the semester. Evan is an aerospace major. He is set to graduate in May of 2016, but he's going to stick around and go to graduate school here. He is one of our senior Buchanan Fellows. And one of the things I think is so interesting is that since 2013, he's worked in the Aerospace Department's NASA Focus Lab, which has inspired his thesis here, NASA's Focus Lab Operations Manual. His project was directed by Dr. Andrea, help me with this, Giorgio. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Evan, and it's yours.
Thank you. So for my honors college thesis, I decided to create the NASA Focus Lab Operations Manual. And before I get too far in depth into what the operations manual consists of, I first want to talk about a little bit about the NASA Focus Lab itself, why it was created, how it operates, why it's important, and the problem it will be facing in the coming years, and then the solution, which is the operations manual. So to begin, MTSU's aerospace program consists of 6 concentrations, and they are flight dispatch, administration, professional pilot, technology, unmanned aircraft system operations, or what we call UAS operations, and maintenance management. And prior to 2010, MTSU's aerospace program was facing a major issue, and that was its aerospace students were taught in their individual silos. And what that means is that students in one aerospace concentration were only learning the skills and techniques that they needed to be successful in their area, and not really interacting with the other students in the other concentrations. And also there was no program that brought all of the, or seminar or course that brought all of the aerospace students together to learn how to work in teams across discipline. And so this is a major issue because in the aviation industry today, members from all aviation disciplines come together to work in teams across discipline to operate aircraft safely and efficiently 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So Dr. Paul Craig, who's an aerospace professor here at MTSU, saw this problem and he wanted to fix that. So he decided to look out into the aviation industry and find that one place where members from all disciplines come together to work as a team 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to operate aircraft safely and efficiently. And the one place he found that was the Flight Operations Center of an airline. And so he wanted to bring something like that to MTSU. And so what he did was he applied for 2 NASA grants, and he actually received both of those grants in 2010. And he used both of those grants to create the NASA Focus Lab. And this is a panorama view of what the NASA Focus Lab looks like in MTSU's aerospace department. And the NASA Focus Lab stands for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Flight Operations Center Unified Simulation Lab, or very short, simple, and sweet, the NASA Focus Lab. And this is another top-down view of what the Focus Lab looks like in operation in the department. But not only do we have this, we also have a CRJ-200 aircraft simulator located out at the Murfreesboro Airport. And CRJ stands for Canadair Regional Jet, and a CRJ-200 is just a 50-passenger aircraft. And it's a level 5 simulator, so that means that the FAA believes it's an exact replica, if not a very similar replica, of a cockpit in a real CRJ-200 aircraft. So overall, the NASA Focus Lab is a simulation of a flight operations center of a regional airline that we call Universal Airlines. And senior undergraduate aerospace students enrolled in the Aero 4040, or what we call the Aerospace Seminar course, are placed in the teams, and about 10 to 12 students are placed into each team. And the students on the teams are assigned to specific positions that best reflect their aerospace concentration. For example, we have a maintenance control position in the NASA Focus Lab. So we place a student from the maintenance management concentration in that position for 2 reasons. 1, that's what they've been studying for the last 4 years. And 2, we want to give them real-world experience before going out and working in the aviation industry in the maintenance area. So after they're placed in the teams, they have to run a simulation where they operate 30 CRJ-200 simulated aircraft, including the CRJ simulator out at the Murfreesboro Airport. In all, they have to handle approximately 80 flights during a 3-hour simulation. And these 80 flights service 16 airports throughout the southeast region of the United States, including Nashville, Jacksonville, Atlanta, Knoxville, Memphis, and Miami, and more. And not only do they have to handle these flights, but they also have to handle real-world scenarios that the NASA Focus Lab staff implement into the simulation. So the NASA Focus Lab staff consists of undergraduate students, graduate students, and professors from the IO Psychology or the Industrial and Organizational Psychology program here, and also the Aerospace program. And they implement real-world scenarios in the aviation industry, or what we call them as triggers, that vary in difficulty into the simulation. Once they're implemented, the students have to coordinate and communicate effectively to resolve the trigger as a team. And they have to come up with solutions that handle the triggers in a safe, legal, and efficient manner. And so once they come up with the solution as a team, they implement the solution into the simulation for that trigger. Then the NASA Focus Lab staff evaluates their solution. And if the staff determines that they did not handle the trigger legally, safely, and efficiently, then they'll implement downstream consequences, which is another term for negative consequences, into the simulation. However, if they do handle it legally, safely, and efficiently, then no downstream consequences are implemented into the simulation. So basically, the reason why we implement downstream consequences is that we want them to know how their decisions ultimately affect the airline, so that they don't make those similar negative decisions when they're out in the field. So overall, there's many reasons why the Focus Lab is important, but I've outlined 4 here. 1, it helps prepare MTSU's aerospace students for work in the aviation industry by enhancing their knowledge and skills, especially their teamwork skills. It's also a one-of-a-kind simulation. It's the only simulation of its kind that we know of in the entire United States. It also plays a significant role in the Aerospace Department's accreditation with the Aviation Accreditation Board International. It is the capstone course of the Aerospace Department. And it also helps establish MTSU as an aerospace research institution, because during every NASA Focus Lab simulation, the staff conduct various research, and they use that data from the research to write articles which are published in national and international journals. So you may be thinking, why did you write a thesis over the Focus Lab? Like, it looks like it's running great, there's nothing wrong, like, what in the world? Well, there's no problem now, there's a problem coming up in the future. And the problem is 50% of the NASA Focus Lab staff is comprised of undergraduate and graduate students who play very specific and important roles in the operation of the lab. But they'll be graduating within the next 2 years. So what we'll have to do is hire new undergraduate and graduate students to fill those roles, but there's no information or procedural documents that explain how to operate the lab. So when they come in, they won't really understand how they're supposed to perform the tasks that they're assigned. So because of that, it puts not only the high quality simulations in jeopardy, but it also puts the NASA Focus Lab success in jeopardy. So in order to resolve this problem, I wrote the NASA Focus Lab Operations Manual. And the NASA Focus Lab Operations Manual basically is a document that tells you how to run the lab from startup to shutdown. And it contains 6 chapters, and I just want to give a very brief overview of what each chapter consists of. So chapter 1 is the background information, and it tells you information about the creation, history, purposes, and importance of the lab, and also about the virtual airline that we run, Universal Airlines, its values, its goals, its corporate structure, and more. The second chapter is the NASA Focus Lab Startup and Shutdown Procedures, and it basically provides procedures on how to turn on, prepare, and shut down all the equipment in the lab. Chapter 3 is the Administrative Roles chapter, and it provides procedures on how to perform all the tasks required of each NASA Focus Lab administrative role. And it tells you before, during, and after, and it's a procedural document that makes sure that they are performing their tasks in the correct order. And there's 5 of them. There's the NASA Focus Lab Administrator, which I currently am, the Crew Scheduling Coordinator, the Flight Operations Data 2, or FOD2 Coordinator that we like to say for short, the Maintenance Expert, and the Weather Expert. Chapter 4 is the Troubleshooting Procedures, and it provides procedures in detail on how to fix all the errors that occur on the equipment. Chapter 5 is the Maintenance on the NASA Focus Lab equipment and website, and it's pretty self-explanatory, maintains the NASA Focus Lab's website and equipment. And Chapter 6 is the NASA Focus Lab Terms to Know, and it provides specific aviation terms and abbreviations and acronyms that are used throughout the entire operations manual. So in order to create all those chapters, I used a process that consisted of 6 methods. The first one was the interview process. I interviewed each NASA Focus Lab staff member on their perspective of why the NASA Focus Lab is important. the purposes of the Focus Lab, and also the history and creation, because we operate the lab as a team. There's no one person operating the lab, and I wanted to make sure everybody's perspective was placed in the manual. And then also I interviewed each NASA Focus Lab staff member who runs the administrative role, because I needed to make sure all the tasks are documented in the manual correctly. But before I did that, I had to get IRB, or Institutional Review Board approval. It was a pretty quick and easy process, and the only thing I couldn't do was put the names of the staff members in the manual for confidentiality purposes. And the second is I used my personal knowledge and experience. As pointed out by Dr. Miller, she said that I've been the manager since 2013, and so because of that, I know how to start the lab, I know how to shut it down, I know how to maintain and troubleshoot all the equipment. So I use my personal knowledge and experience to write the majority of the operations manual. In addition, I simultaneously recorded and performed procedures, and what this means is that I came in during the summer, this last summer, to the Focus Lab, and I sat down at the various pieces of equipment in the lab, and I performed procedures that needed to be documented in the manual. And I did this for two reasons. One, I needed to make sure I was documenting them in the correct order, and two, I needed to make sure that they were accurate. What I was writing down was actually how they're supposed to do it. So that helps, prevent critical mistakes from occurring. And then I also took pictures of 3 specific procedures in the startup and shutdown procedures chapter, because those 3 procedures were kind of iffy. I wasn't really sure if that was the correct wording I should use. But I just wanted to make sure that the people performing those procedures knew exactly what I meant by that, make sure that it's just pretty much like a check, make sure they did it correctly. And then I did research in my literature review. And then finally, I can't stress this enough, if you're doing a thesis, your weekly meetings with your thesis advisor is critical. I met every Wednesday with Dr. Georgiou, who is my thesis advisor, and she sat down with me for an hour every Wednesday and talked about how I could improve the manual, what I could change about it. She made me think outside the box, how could I make it more professional to be more realistic? And so she was incredible to work with, and I would definitely recommend her as an advisor if you're looking for one. So in all, the NASA Focus Lab Operations Manual will be available for current and future NASA Focus Lab staff members to run the lab. And it will ultimately help in 3 specific ways. One, it'll help sustain the quality of the lab for future MTSU aerospace students. 2, it'll help prevent critical mistakes from being made by current and future lab staff members, especially when starting the equipment, shutting it down, preparing it. And then finally, it'll provide continuity when the staffing turnover does occur in the coming years. So now I'd like to open it up to questions. Yes?
I'm assuming that you're in the aerospace program.
Yes.
Are you also in IO Psych?
I started that with my minor, and I decided to change to management because I felt that was more appropriate for what I was going to go into.
Okay.
Yes?
One of the things you talked about at first was illegal stuff. So if I'm running the flight lab, what are illegal things I would do that would get me in trouble? I'm just curious.
So
Not you personally, but
right.
other people.
Well, there's been times where an aircraft was down for maintenance, and the students decided to release the aircraft while people were still performing maintenance on the aircraft, and they let the aircraft take off with people stuck in the wheel well, where the landing gear goes. So that's not good. So there wasn't good coordination and communication about what was going on with the aircraft at the time, and but they learned from that mistake. They learned in the future to not do that. But yeah, there's some interesting things that go on in the lab, but it's good because they learn from their mistakes and they prevent stuff like that occurring when they go into the aviation industry. Yes, it's very bad. Yeah.
So I might have missed this, but is the manual for people like yourself who are going to be operating the lab externally, or for the actual students who are?
Yeah, it'll be for the staff members. It's an administrative manual, so it'll only be for the staff members. You had a question?
Yeah, so the people stuck in the wheel, that's in the simulation.
Yes, it's in the simulation. Every scenario that we run is a simulation. But we do talk to former alumni who are out and work in the aviation industry every day. We ask them, what types of problems that do you occur on a daily basis? And that's what we implement into the simulation, because we want it to be as realistic as possible, so that when they go out into the aviation industry, they can say, oh, I've seen this problem, I faced this in the Focus Lab. And they can be like, what did I do? And remember how they handled the situation and kind of apply their knowledge to that situation in the future.
What was your final word count on this?
You don't want to know. It was 256 pages. It was about 70,500. Yeah, but it was a procedural document, so it was step-by-step procedure. So it probably would, if it's not word to word across left to right. So.
And is there someone that's going to keep it up?
Yes, it's a continuously updated document. So what's going to happen is I'll keep it on the NASA Focus Lab server, and then whoever's the administrator, whoever takes over from my position, will continuously update it as new technology comes available and that we use, different procedures that we use, things like that.
I have a comment rather than a question. I just want to commend Evan on this project, which I find to be incredibly impressive. Evan identified a real-world need, basically, within this focus lab where he'd been serving as administrator. And he addressed that with an eye toward making sure that the lab continues to function at its highest possible level in perpetuity. So he anticipated the need to train people in the future to perform the roles correctly, safely, and legally, right? And he provided for the possibility of updating this manual so that it will continue to be a living document. So he, in addition, I mean, beyond this being an excellent thesis, he's done our university a great service by writing this manual. This is something that you would hire a professional to come in and do. And Evan is an honors student here, and he saw the need, and he stepped up and produced it. So it's really good work in my view.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
On that note, how did the lab continue to function efficiently without a manual describing to later people who came along?
So I described that as I described that as a telephone game. So the people who left, before they left, they would tell other people how they performed their roles. And some of the procedures kind of got lost in translation, and I wanted to stop that because that doesn't need to happen if we want to continue providing all of the aerospace students a high-quality simulation and realistic simulation. So, so yeah, it was pretty much a telephone game where they just passed the word along until this document was created. Anybody else? No? Cool.
Please join me in thanking her.